Welcome to another episode of Tech Intersect, where we explore the intersections of technology, business, and innovation. And today I am thrilled to welcome John Rossman to the proverbial stage, definitely a trailblazer in digital transformation and leadership. John, an executive coach, advisor, founder of Rossman Partners, is really renowned for his early role at Amazon, where he was instrumental in launching the Amazon Marketplace in 2002, 22
Over 20
years.
years ago.
Let's just pause and reflect on that. Outstanding. I can't wait to ask a few questions about that as well. But he's also the best-selling author of The Amazon Way and Think Like Amazon. And today we're diving into his latest work, Big Bet Leadership, your transformation playbook for winning in the hyper digital era. As you all know, one of my favorite eras to ever era. He co-authored with Kevin McCaffrey, and this groundbreaking book is poised to be the first leadership guide for the age of artificial intelligence, offering principles and tactics for audacious outcomes and complex problem solving, what the world needs more of, to be sure. So this is a treasure trove of insights, both in the forthcoming book and certainly in our conversation today. So if you are looking to propel your business or your career in this rapidly evolving digital landscape, you are in the right place. We'll talk about all of that and more in a moment. But first, John, welcome.
Tanya, thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome.
Absolutely. So let's dive in, and please let's begin where we are. Shall we start by sharing what inspired you and also Kevin to write Big Bet Leadership, and how it's different from your previous work?
Yeah, so the inspiration came from many spots, but one of them, and this is kind of Kevin's and my intersection. So Kevin ran a enterprise strategy and planning team at T-Mobile. He invited me to be an innovation advisor. We worked together for almost 3 years to build a new business incubation capability to go from kind of concept through kind of trial of new concepts. And what we did was we adapted many of the Amazon aspects of the Amazon playbook and some other things to put into an organization that didn't have that DNA, that didn't have that culture, and kind of subtly adapt and not try to create a transformation there, but just some nudges along the way of like how to actually get this done in the fastest, easiest way, given who you are. And so that was many of the learnings came from that work that Kevin and I did together at T-Mobile. But I think ultimately what inspires us to write this book is that, and this is kind of the setup of the book, which is, if you think the past 25 years of digital capability, digital change, customer change, business model change, all of the great things that have happened and the disruption that have happened. If you think the last 25 years was exciting, I think the next 25 years is going to be 10x of that. But juxtapose that with what we know about the success rate of organizations and leaders being successful at leading those types of transformations. We know that 85% of all of these transformations, growth concepts, innovation programs, they suffer from an 85% failure rate. Some major studies put it at only 0.5% of major projects are on time, on budget, and deliver the business benefits. So we're heading into a time when more transformation is going to be required, but yet we're horrible at making these types of changes. Like that's a tough nut to follow, to
Absolutely.
swallow. And so that's what inspired us, was to write an executive playbook to help senior leaders do a better aspect of their job and what's going to be a growing importance aspect of their job. That's what inspired us.
That is so critically important. And as someone who has, you know, been on various platforms as a leader, the chair of the Maker DAO's Maker Foundation, now serving in leadership at Digital Currency Group, as a former uh, associate dean of a law school. I probably, if with my own firsthand experience, know exactly why. But I want you to tell our listeners and viewers, why is it so difficult for leadership to turn the Titanic around?
Yeah, yeah. If it were easy to answer that question, we would be able to have addressed that. The problem is that there's these initiatives die from 1,000 cuts, and
Mm,
it's not, well, we become agile, or we adopt some framework. Like, there's so many failure points to do. And so what we did was we broke down from the senior leaders that we both learned from directly and that we studied closely. So the four in particular are Jeff Bezos, John Legere, who is the CEO of T-Mobile and led it through an incredible growth and turnaround strategy, Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, and Elon Musk. And
mhm,
what those four leaders do to lead transformation in their organizations is they have three habits that they have. They create clarity, they maintain velocity, and they accelerate risk and value validation. And
mm.
so the book is framed in how to exercise those three habits and manifest those three habits for senior leaders. And so if you can do those three things, create clarity, maintain velocity, accelerate risk and value, those are the areas where most leaders suffer the most and where these transformations most go wrong.
That is really fascinating. And I love very much highlighting with specificity. Well, one, the idea of death by 1,000 cuts could not be more accurate. But when you you have to right size what the pathway looks like for leaderships to do that next right thing and make space for iteration while also not just maintaining, but also continuing to have a return on investment for shareholders. If it's a corporate, a public company, for example. Uh,
Well, I'll use that as I'll give one major reason why transformations fail. So you mentioned like capturing value, and so one of the mistakes that happens is that big calculations, we calculate ourselves rich on a
mhm.
transformation or on a strategy upfront. We commit to it, both internally and sometimes even externally. And then we proceed on the journey of figuring out what it is. Well, now what happens is
Mhm.
is that we learn, like, oh, maybe that hypothesis wasn't the right hypothesis, but yet we've committed to it. Oh, maybe the value isn't going to come on the timetable or the scale we thought, but we've
Mm,
committed. Now all of a sudden the individuals involved, well, they start seeing it through their individual lens, so they start retracting, they start pulling back. Now
mm,
all of a sudden we're managing to the lowest common denominator. Okay, now our goal is keep this on time, on track.
stop
They
the
lose,
bleeding.
they stop the pursuit of ambition, right?
Mhm.
And so that's just like one of the setups that goes wrong. You want to size the prize up front, but signal it in a way of saying, we believe this is the opportunity. We believe this is our hypothesis for value calculation. And here's the things that we need to test out, the most critical things that we need to accelerate the risk and value validation up front. And then we will have a much better understanding and a surety of being able to make the right types of commitments. That's just like one of the areas where big enterprises get it completely wrong. They commit
Right.
upfront, and then it's just a race to the bottom and kind of everybody retracting, because these things become really personal for
Really
careers
quick.
really quickly.
Right.
And so the book is written, it's both kind of a strategy and problem solving book, but it's really written to the individual also who's leading these things, because the career risk is as high as the business risk is of these initiatives. And so
Mhm.
if you don't recognize that, like oh, like you think you want to go on this journey,
This
great.
uncharted journey, right?
Let's manage this in a way that that de-risks it from both a business and career standpoint while maintaining the ambition, in fact, amplifying the ambition for why we undertake these journeys to begin with.
John, let's take a look at it from identifying customer frustrations for growth as well, because you've highlighted some critical things internally and perhaps in terms of messaging. Now let's look at the one that pays the rent, pays the bills. And can you give an example of how the approach has successfully transformed a business dealing with frustrations as well?
Yeah, so in the customer journey, and this is where really it is about kind of problem solving
Hmm.
on one standpoint. What tends to happen is that we don't get clear on either the problem we are trying to solve or the specific killer feature, the critical reason why a customer, and this could be a user or an employee or a partner, why they are going to love and to switch to this new approach, right?
Mm,
And so we're fuzzy about the problem that we're solving. We're even fuzzier about where we're going to, like what is the critical thing that we think is the killer feature, the best idea we're going to create. And so no wonder these digital transformations take forever and they go off track, is because we're not clear, and we're not clear amongst ourselves as to,
right.
well, what problem are we solving and what's our hypothesis as to the killer feature is. So we call that the big bet vector, right? Which is get super clear about the problem you're going to solve. We have a specific exercise in the book that's called the what sucks exercise, right? And so and we use that kind of spicy terminology both so that it hopefully triggers a curiosity. It's like what sucks, and everything, right? But it prompts you to seek a deeper insight about the situation. Like there's lots of like low velocity, low hurt pain for your customer, but what's the thing that really sucks for your customer? And if you can get clear about that, oh man, now we really understand the problem, and the problem that a customer is willing to pay for to fix, right? And then if you can be super clear about the outcome, we call this thinking in outcomes. This is an adaptation of Amazon's working backwards approach. And this is the type of
Mm,
thing we did at T-Mobile, which is like, okay, let's break this down. Let's make this approach much clearer for companies that are not Amazon and everything. And so then if you create, here's the problem, here's our hypothesis of the future state, and we focus early on the financial case. Like, is the juice worth the squeeze here? And what's the critical risks relative to that business case? Now we're set up to actually frame this correctly. We think this is where we're going. We think it's worthwhile. We can evaluate relative to other situations or problems or opportunities we have, right? That's
mhm.
resource allocation. That's portfolio management. And we're signaling to everybody involved, like, this is a bet, right? Like we think it's worth it, but we know there's material risk.
Mhm.
Now we're set up a little bit better. This is the start of it. This isn't the end of it. We're set
Right.
up a bit better to actually proceed in a truly experimental mindset and approach.
Which can be really daunting for legacy leadership when there's one thing to have a bet. There's another thing that you call out to have the big bet, particularly in the hyper digital era as well. Talk to us about how legacy leaders not only need to do all of the things that you've identified the metrics for success, calibrating risk, certainly managing expectations, but now you're doing it in a digital era where many legacy leaders have already trailed behind.
Yeah, well, I'll tackle that really important question in a couple of ways. So I think too often leaders at bigger companies, they undertake these things because, you know, the board and the market is asking them, well, what's your digital strategy? And their team is like, hey, we've got all these ideas, and they say just, okay, go for it, and everything, right? And to me, like that is can lead to some incremental growth and incremental ideas, and you can build some capability within the organization. So that's good. That's important. But those are small moves. Those are not bold moves. Those are not big bets. And what research shows is that if you want to be a top quadrant performing company in your industry where you choose to play, that bold moves are required in order to either shift your positioning within those quadrants or to stay at the top quadrant. Incremental moves will not change the curve, the positioning that you're on. So
Right.
bold moves are required. Now, that's in the current state. Now, what I frame as the hyper digital era is basically the setup that it's a combination of mega forces. Technology and AI is one of the mega forces that is here, that is coming at us, but it's not the only one. The other mega forces that I believe are going to force us into an era where big bets are even more important. Bold moves are even more required if you want to play to win the game. If you just want to stay average, great.
Right.
Like this book probably isn't for you. But if you want to be a top performer, you have to make bold moves. Those other mega forces are which is the demographics of our workforce and the shortage of our workforce, right? So 20 in 10 years, 65% of our workforce will be over 65 years in age. Our birth rate has dropped since 1995 from 15 per 1,000 to 11.1, on its way to 10. So
Mm-hmm.
labor constraints are here, are on us, and are only going to get more serious. So that's one mega force. The other mega force is a country concept and a country mega force that is going to have a real impact to business leaders. And that is entitlement spending, debt spending, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are on a trajectory of going from 55% to 75% of our federal budget being committed to entitlement and debt spending. The only way we solve that as a country is to grow, right? Is to get more efficient, is through productivity. And then the third force, or the fourth force that is going to connect these three mega forces together, is aggressive capital that's in the market from venture capitalists, from private equity, and from these big tech platforms that have incredible confidence in their ability to shape operating models for companies. And an operating model is essentially the effectiveness, the cost basis for which a company competes. And so those forces combined are what I frame as the hyper digital era, and where these bold moves, big bets, are going to be even more required than today. So we better get good at these, and we're not good at them today. And that's why we wrote the book, and that's who we are writing this for, is for the companies that want to win in this digital era.
So we've addressed a lot of the 800-pound gorillas who are really transforming things, not obviously just here in the United States, but around the world, as we have an awareness of an increasingly globalized society. But I also think of kind of my legacy of small entrepreneurs who also want to make big and bold moves as a matter of creating, maintaining, transferring wealth, particularly also when I think of communities that may not be in the boardrooms, but also have a vested interest in the success of the country, and certainly a vested interest in the success of their families, so that the next generation is not starting over again. So I imagine the principles that we've laid out and that you've laid out specifically in the book also can apply in a really impactful way for smaller organizations and leaders of smaller companies. So talk about the principles of big bet leadership in the context of a smaller organization.
Yeah. So you're spot on. And the third group I would include in there is medium-sized kind of legacy
Yes.
businesses, right?
Yes.
And so you've got really big enterprises, you've got small entrepreneurs, but I think the real sweet spot for bold moves and big bets and being able to move quick is established mid-market companies who know their customers, who know how they make money, how they serve them, but have the resources and that are playing the long game in order to actually transform their business. So I would group in those three areas. So these principles, tactics absolutely scale from large companies to even individuals. So Kevin and I use these tools and this thinking and these approaches as we think about our own business that we're doing. Some of the most important aspects out of this book are about how do we do the fastest, cheapest experimentation possible to create a portfolio of concepts and ideas and refining those really early, really cheaply. Well, the way to really do that is by writing these concepts out and then debating amongst yourself to do that. Well, you can do that really as a team of one, as a team of 10, a team of
Me
50,
and
or
ChatGPT do this
a company
constantly.
of 10,000, and using ChatGPT
Right.
really as your thought partner of doing that.
Right.
So that gets to some of the tools and solutions that are available to readers of the book. So we've taken the book, we kept it purposely very readable. It suffer from TLDR, which is too long, didn't read, right? It's a great listen. But when you buy the book, you get access to a ton of resources, including a Big Bet journal. So the journal takes all the concepts of the book and either creates the space for you to write and debate these, or as a checklist and an idea list to put these actions into place. So it helps you double check your actions. We have a Big Bet GPT. So this is Chat GPT specifically loaded with Big Bet leadership to use as your interactive partner and accelerator. And we've built a set of prompts that are specifically engineered to be layered together to help you do these exercises and do this. But writing, you can't outsource the thinking and the writing and the debating that goes on. It can just help accelerate and bring some perspectives to you. So that ability to actually critically think through the subtle flavors or the subtle variations of what you think it is and what are the critical risks and how might you test those critical risks really early, really cheaply. Those are some of the first principles of Big Bet leadership. And again, that scales from super large companies to teams and leaders of one.
I teach in the blockchain and distributed ledger area primarily, although I also teach administrative law, which has been very helpful in the blockchain space, I must say.
What a great combination.
Who knew? Who knew that
Right,
all my
right.
egghead things? And by training, I'm an intellectual property lawyer. So I'm on fire all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. It's a very exciting time. Which leads me to this final question that I really want to hear your feedback on. We've talked about, and I agree, that those medium-sized companies that have both a history and established record of some measurable success, they figured out who their ideal avatar is, and now it's time to mature to the next level, right? They're totally in the sweet spot. What I also think about and talk about with my students is the fact that 10 years ago, so many of the things and the jobs, the careers that I'm talking about with them now did not exist. It wasn't even on the radar. And so they are also entering a workforce at a time where in so many areas in quote unquote Web3, we're building the plane while we're flying it. And yet I think this is the greatest opportunity for folks who haven't made sizable, they did the incremental thing for a while, actually have an opportunity under the right conditions, funding, et cetera, to really take off. And so last question is just how do you envision the future of leadership in this rapidly evolving digital world? We've kind of, you know, talked about it in various places, but just to finish out on that, because I think that will be most hopeful for people who may be looking to upskill, reskill, or pivot altogether.
Yeah. Well, leadership is a skill, and it's a skill that's specifically there to help influence or guide a set of people for a specific mission. And people like they think of leadership as this like ether, like genetic gift that you have, or anything. No, it's a skill that you have to realize, like for different missions or different moments, you need different types of leadership skills to be, a 360-degree a leader for all moments, right? A leader for all missions. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
mission we're specifically focused on is like, hey, when you actually need to change the essence of a business, right? You need to grow and adapt. Well, that's a specific type of leadership skill set. And so
Mm.
that's one answer to your question, which is like, this isn't an entire leadership manifesto or the full set of skills. It's specifically focused on the skills needed for change. One of those skills is the skill of communication and storytelling. Stories are 22 times more memorable than facts, figures, bullet points are, right? And
Mm.
so part of your ability to lead, to guide, to influence a group of people on mission is to be able to tell the story of where you're going. Some of the mistakes that leaders make relative to that is, I'll mention two, which is they basically complain about the current state, right?
Right.
They create this burning platform about why this is unsustainable or why the current situation doesn't work or how it's going to change, but then they leave it there, right? Like,
Right.
well, that is very unhelpful actually to helping to take a group of employees or a set of partners to the future. The other mistake they make is that they're very vague about
Mm.
that future state, right? Like, oh, we're going to improve the customer experience or we're going to have a digitally transformed business. That does nothing for me. That doesn't tell me at all. So, as we talked about with that big bet vector, now we've
Mm-hmm.
equipped you with a quiver of communication skills where you can tell a story specifically about, hey, this is how we're going to impact the customer's life. This is our hypothesis about where we're going and why it's going to be worth it. And here's the risks, here's the hypotheses, the things we're going to test out. Well, now you're equipping all of your stakeholders with
Right.
much better information. So being able to be that chief repeating officer, that communication skill set, that's going to be an even more heightened skill for leaders in the future. I think that that type of targeted chief repeating officer communication skill
Mm.
and being able to actually experiment through thought experiments, through these memo types of experiments, if you can do those two things, like, I think you've got a skill set for the future.
That is so fascinating as I've started to talk and consider a bit how in this increasingly globalized society where we're interacting with far more people, far more liquidity around the world is unlocking, opening up so many opportunities, that we're going to have to find a both and approach to competition, and collaboration. And what it sounds like to me, and what I think that you were really highlighting, as very important as a CRO, Chief Repeating Officer, here for that, this idea that the collaborative model is what's going to move the needle. That takes something from incremental to perhaps exponential and trying to 10x, in a hyper digital space. Amazing.
Well, I love that concept of 10x. That's kind of my one of my personal goals in this journey is to, like, hey, this has been a really fun career, you know what I mean? What would I have to do to 10x it? You know what I mean, right? Like, that's
Mm,
kind of the mental model I've been thinking through. But I think you're absolutely right, which is no matter what degree of change, if you can truly lead,
yeah.
guide, or influence people to a specific point and bring them along on what the risks are, what you're sure about, what you're not sure about. That's why we use the term bet, right?
Mm,
A bet communicates that we know has inherent risk to it. The big part is equally as important. The big part says, but we have material upside in why we're pursuing this, and that's why we chose the framing on this as big bet leadership,
hmm.
because both of those words are really important to the essence of the situation, which is bold moves are required, they are high risk, but you can actually de-risk those things for your organization and for yourself, and that actually allows you to magnify, to amplify, to 10x the ambition that you should have as a business.
John Rossman, trailblazer in digital transformation and leadership, founder of Rossman Partners and co-author of Big Bet Leadership, Your Transformation Playbook for Winning in the Hyper Digital Era. John, thank you so much for this conversation. I hope to have you back. I think this is a really important topic that you've introduced the beginning of a process, cognizable steps, actionable items, but also it requires follow through and iteration in itself to continue to make those big bets in leadership. So I thank you, sir.
Well, thank you for all you do and for your preparation and incredible conversation.